Hey everybody, it is Natalie from Power Moon Tarot. Thank you for catching me on today's webcast. I do appreciate all of you who join. My name is Natalie and I am an astrologer here on YouTube. I also read tarot and I am glad that you are here with me today. Let me go ahead and make sure I've got my technology up and running. It looks like I do. Oh, perfect. Good. So, anyway, I am excited today to bring you this webcast about the sun. And you can see there's a big light behind me right there shining. So, that is going to represent our sun for today because it's kind of dark and dreary out today. And I think it's a very appropriate day to do a lecture on the sun because we are on the day of the week, Sunday, which Sunday comes from the sun. So we are very much appropriate with the day of the week. And also today is fall equinox, which is the balance of the light and the dark. And tonight or today, the balance between the light and the dark exists. And after today, we're going to start slipping in the northern hemisphere into more darkness. And but today is that switch over point, and we're also moving into Libra season, which happy birthday Libras if you happen to see this or are watching. And we are going to go ahead and talk about the sun today. So it's a shame in astrology because the sun as a entity oftentimes doesn't get the due that it should. We talk about Mercury, Mars, Venus, other planets, but we don't actually focus in on the sun. And when we think of the sun, we usually think of, well, I'm a Pisces, or I'm a Gemini, or I'm a Sagittarius, or I don't know why I'm hitting all the mutable signs today, but I'm a Scorpio. We don't really think about, what does the sun in an astrological chart signify when we put it in a specific sign, like, Gemini or Cancer or something like that. There are additional meanings and layers that are added on to the definition of the sun. But the sun itself has its own standing definition in and of itself, and in and of itself alone. So I think that is important to realize in astrology. And I put that on the PowerPoint slide here. I put the sun as a planetary body in astrology. Now, will you say, well, the sun isn't necessarily a planet, it's a luminary or a light. And when we talk about, the sun and the moon in astrology, they really are the luminaries, but they are given the title of planet when we're talking about the 7 traditional planets, for example, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon. Okay. So I just wanted to kind of make that clear when we're talking about the sun in particular. And as I mentioned before, it's not, great that, because the sun loves attention. The sun loves light, focus, attention. It wants that light shining on it. And so the fact that we never really give enough due or much attention to the sun beyond, like, I'm a Gemini or Sagittarius or whatever, kind of like, I don't know, if I was the sun, I'd be a little disappointed. I'd be like, focus on me more, right? So, so that is what we are going to talk about today as we talk about the sun. Okay. And I put up here on this PowerPoint slide, I put up 4 words that really do resonate when we're talking about the sun in particular as a entity in a astrological chart. And the sun is keen to have respect shown to it. Okay, it is the center of our universe, so it should be respected. When we talk about the sun, we talk about shining our light. We can talk about being confident in who we are. The sun also has to do with receiving honor and dignity and royalties. Okay, so when we think of the sun, we can think of respect, honor, confidence, and then the last one that I have here is vitality. And that's an important one in our chart because oftentimes we can talk about in a astrological chart, people that are very high energy versus people that are like lower energy. And people that have suns that are really operating at a high level may have a high level of motivation. They may have a high level of confidence. They may have they may expect that the world treat them a certain way, or they may have a lot of self-worth. Versus we all know people in the world who, and maybe even ourselves, right, who at times haven't given ourselves enough credit, or haven't been confident enough in ourselves when we actually should be more confident, right? And because of that, sometimes it can like wear our energy down or make us really low vibe or low energy. Okay, so vitality as it relates to the sun is very important too. And vitality, as in physical vitality, and how quickly we can bounce back from something if we are hurt or are injured, which, does play a role in healing and recovering from, setbacks and injuries and things like that. It's funny because I have a sister who she's always been super hyper, happy, upbeat, outgoing, and I always would, pair her first name, which I won't say on here, obviously, but her first name with sunshine. So I would call her first name and then sunshine after it, because she is always very like bouncy and outgoing and happy and cheerful and energetic, like very, very energetic. And when people, as we do in life, go through, highs and lows, illnesses and health, periods of being ill, periods of being healthy, having like a good disposition or trying to stay cheerful or upbeat about yourself and what you're going through does help, right? And I know it's not easier said than done, but I know that it does kind of help. And so with the sun, we can also look at the sun as an indicator of our health and how like vibing we are, like how vibrant we are in our skin and in our energy, and how vibrant and how you know boldly shining are we in the world. That is very much a function of our sun. And if we have a debilitated sun, or if we have a sun that is, squaring Saturn or squaring Neptune, or, a sun that is feeling challenged, a sun that is feeling for example, people that have sun in the eighth house or sun in the 12th house, okay, even sun in the fourth house, right? Those are the hidden water houses, and those houses tend to make us more. We can feel like we're being ignored, or we can feel like people aren't seeing us, or maybe we don't really want that much attention on ourselves, right? And so we can talk about, the position of the sun in our charts, and what sign it's in, and what aspects it is making, in order to understand what is it all about. And, one question we can ask ourselves with the sun is, how comfortable are we being ourselves? Okay. And how comfortable are we shining our light out into the world? Do we hide from our light? Or do we hide from the light, or do we actively seek attention and validation? Like, where are you on that spectrum? If you look within yourself, do I like attention? Do I want people focusing on me? Or do I like to kind of chill in the background? Like, am I a shy person, or am I an outgoing person? How is my self-confidence, right? Just because somebody is very attention seeking doesn't mean that they have confidence, right? And we know that too. We know that there are some people in the world who are very attention seeking and validation seeking, but it's because they have low confidence that they're always seeking that validation or that attention. And so when we get into those areas of our life, when we talk about attention seeking, validation seeking, and some of that is healthy, right? Some of that is human. Like, I want to be validated. I want attention. I want people to notice me. I want to be an important person in this world. Those are healthy ego needs that a person can have. But, we all know when those things can get out of balance, or they get out of control, or there wasn't enough, attention given growing up. And so now people are really seeking it because there is a low self-worth, right? And so when we get into these types of issues, we are really talking about sun issues for sure. And we're going to talk about some like validation seeking behavior, which I said is not all bad, right? Because I mean, what if we really did do a good job? Ideally we should get validation, right? But the sun is very wanting of awards and wanting to shine and wanting to be seen. Now, for instance, in my own astrology chart, I have my sun is in the 8th house, okay? And if you don't know where your sun is in your chart, or you don't know your chart, then you can book in an appointment with me. I'll drop my link in the description box below to my website to get your natal chart read, and I can help you with that. But for those of you that are like, oh no, I know where my sun is in my chart, like think about where your sun is in your chart, particularly for people that have sun in the 8th house or sun in the 12th house. And like I said before, maybe even sun in the 4th house as well. And for me, like as an 8th house sun, I don't always like being seen by people. I don't always like people perceiving me. And I don't always like people knowing what I am up to all the time. Like I can be mysterious at times. I can hide my motives and motivations at times. I don't always want all the attention on me. I'm not always focused on being the center of attention in a room full of people. In fact, a lot of times I like to hide out in the corner with my sunglasses on until I get a feel for the energy in the room. And then maybe I'll start talking to people, or then maybe I'll start engaging with people. And, some people, they don't like it. They like to hang back and check out the power dynamics and check out what's happening and, see how everything is working before they dive in immediately, right? And then sun in the 12th house people may be like, sorry, I had to move my glasses there. These headphones, do you guys know when you wear headphones, how they like can, and you have glasses on and then they like dig into your head and it's like, great, But but do you guys know when there are some people that like sun in the 12th house people they may not want to be the center of attention either. They may want to like hang out in the background, or they may need a lot of alone time to chill, time to be on their own, time to meditate, time to breathe and you work through everything they're experiencing, and time to be silent and quiet, and time to be reflective and sit by the water and journal. Like that could be a sun in the 12th house. Like I get to know myself and I get to know who I am through the silence and through the meditation and through the quiet listening of who I am as it echoes through the streams of life, right? That's very poetic, like a 12th house sun would be. But that is a very different experience, perhaps, maybe, than someone who has sun in the 1st house, who is like, look at me, here I am. Like, here I am, I'm shaking my maracas here, everybody. I'm like, here I am, notice me, pay attention to me. Or not even that, just maybe like very comfortable with oneself or one's identity, or very comfortable just being yourself. Very popular. Sun in the 1st house could be very popular energy, very comfortable, kind of like being the center of attention, cracking jokes, being the funny guy or the funny girl. Sun in the 1st house people, right? So those types of people are very different than like sun in the 12th house or sun in the 8th house. So we have to think about that in our own chart. Like, where is our sun at, and how do we feel when it comes to the light being shined on us? How do we feel when the attention is focused, and do we like it, or do we shy away, or are we just blah? I don't really like either way. I'm fine if the attention's on me, but I don't really mind either way. Those are the type of things we could think about. Holly, that is so funny. Good to see you. You wrote that you have sun in the 7th house here. And you know what, Holly, that's interesting that you wrote that, because I was just thinking, as I said that about the different houses, I was thinking of a friend of mine who has a Sun Venus conjunction in her 7th house, and I think she likes being like the attention. I think she likes, she's a Libra rising, but I think she likes being noticed for her beauty, particularly with the Sun Venus conjunction in the seventh house. And she is very pretty, but I think she does kind of like the attention. I mean, she's also an Aries too, so I think she does like the attention. Um, but Sun in the seventh could be very popular with people. Sun in the seventh oftentimes needs a partner in order to understand more about who they are, but maybe sometimes can feel um, suffocated by a partner too, because it's like, I want to be myself, but my partner's always there. So there's that kind of dynamic going on with the seventh house, which I think is really interesting. So yeah, we can think about like where our sun is in our chart and how we view ourselves and view others through that lens. And yeah, so sometimes people like being ignored, they like not being seen. And Holly, since you're here, let me ask you, you're an introvert. I was going to ask you if you like being seen or if you like being like the center of attention when the attention comes on you. And you're an introverted extrovert. Yeah, I think I'm a little the same way too, actually. Introverted extrovert. I always get extrovert on those Myers-Briggs tests, but I'm like, I'm not though. So it's kind of weird. But yeah, that is very seventh house sun. I'm a little bit of both, right? I can do both. I can be introverted. I can be extroverted. I can be, like seventh house sun. I'm conscious of social dynamics and of not like hogging all the attention, but I don't mind if the attention is on me. So there's that. And of course, with the sun, we can talk about self-aware, right? And Holly, maybe you are very self-aware when you are in groups of people or when you are around other people, or maybe it's a struggle to maintain self-awareness when you're in groups of people, or maybe you're more well defined by being in groups of people, right? And so that is because the seventh house is a social house, it's an air house, right? So we can think through these issues in our chart, and of course we can change over time too, right? We can become more comfortable with ourselves. Something that started off as really challenging can become more easy with time. And yeah, so sometimes people who have like sun in the eighth house or sun in the 12th house, or even like I said, sun in the fourth house, can sometimes feel like they're being treated like they don't matter, or they don't belong, or don't even try to be yourself because no one is going to respond to it or appreciate it. Or sometimes people with their sun have that sense of feeling ignored by other people and having it really hurt. Some people want to be ignored and they don't care if they're ignored, and then other people are very hurt when they're ignored. So, I would also say, like, if we were perfect human beings, we would have perfect self-awareness all the time, but we don't, right? So that is a very interesting thing. But yeah, and it reminds me of a work colleague of mine that I used to have who she was always she was always doing extra. She was always, taking up extra work and doing extra things for the team, in order to help the team. But she was very much had this needy kind of energy about her, and there was this validation seeking energy coming from her. And I think people could feel that, and because of that, people weren't really responding that well to it. And she started to feel like, well, why am I even doing all this? Like, nobody's even appreciating me. No one's even caring. I'm doing all this stuff for the team and no one is even like giving a shit, right? And so that can be like the wounded ego or the wounded pride, which can very much be like a sun thing too, where we have to check ourselves. Are we doing stuff just because we're hungry for validation and we want it and we need it, and it's like a drug and it's like me needy validation, right? And we're expecting other adults to constantly give us a stream of validation, or do we not mind doing something and we're happy to do it? We would just like a person to say thank you every now and then, right? So I think that there are these things that go on. And Golden Child Tarot says Sun in the fifth house. No idea what that means. Ha ha. Golden Child Tarot, that is a very nice, strong sun for you. The fifth house is one of the strongest, most beneficial houses in the chart. And the fifth house makes a natural trine to the ascendant, and fifth house suns can be very creative, very fun parents, very theatrical, dramatic, fun, creative, talented. Not a problem being the center of attention. Unless, of course, maybe you have like a Sun Saturn conjunction or something like that. But if you just have a good old sun shining in the fifth house, like you're pretty comfortable with things there. And Holly says, I've refined my interactional style over the years. Yeah, definitely, Holly. Like, you can refine that energy of the seventh house of I've refined myself in the way that I interact with others over time, and I've become more self-aware with that. And the seventh house, ever the diplomat type of energy. And and sometimes, socially relating to people is an art form, right? Because we want to be ourselves, right? And we want to show people who we are so we can attract the right people, but we don't want to be overbearing, right? In social situations and like hog the microphone. I mean, the Libra rising in me, whenever I'm in groups of people, I'm always watching. And when I see people who are like talking way too much or exhausting people with their drivel, I'm always like, oh my God. I'm like, read the room, right? So we've got that type of energy going on too. Sometimes we can be a little bit too like aware, where it becomes like a painful thing, and we're like watching everything, which is something I did for many years. But anyway, and sometimes we're just offensive to other people and we can't control it, but anyway. So that example of my work colleague always seeking validation, always trying to, and when people are only doing something in order to get validation, it can come off as very desperate. And that would be like a very debilitated sun, like coming off as very desperate and needy for attention. That would be like a sun that is really struggling or really suffering. I was hanging out with a friend of mine who was visiting me, and we were downstairs around a bunch of other people that I didn't know at like my apartment complex, and there was like a party going on at the pool. And this was years ago, and I had my sunglasses on, and I was just sitting there, and I had huge glasses on, and I was just sitting there like stone-faced, quiet, like watching and looking at everything. And I remember he looked over at me and he goes, "You like to hide out. You like to hide out a lot, don't you?" I mean, he'd been friends with me for years, but he just kind of looked at me like something clicked, and he's like, "You, in groups of people, you like to hide out." And I was like, "Yeah, I do. I like to hide out." And that is definitely like, a sun in the eighth house thing. And, speaking from experience of living in many years ago, I lived in a city of like 10 million people. I used to love the experience of like getting off work and on a Friday and like disappearing into a crowd of 10 million people, knowing I would never run into anyone I worked with, knowing I would never run into anyone I know, knowing that when I left work on a Friday, I was like entering the vortex and no one can find me, And that's a very like sun in the eighth house type of thing. So thinking about where the sun is in your particular chart and how you feel about attention and how you feel about people focusing on you will tell you a lot about your sun. And so let's go ahead and and Holly says natural room readers. Exactly. That you're like reading the room like a little bit too much when you start like having secondhand cringe reactions about people who are like taking up too much oxygen in the room, and you're really getting about it. it's time to go into your own soul at that time and take yourself out of the ethers and push yourself back in your own soul. Um, but anyway, so I want to talk a little bit about the sun's qualities in astrology, because we need to talk a little bit about the technical information too. Um, in astrology, the sun can also be called Sol, or SOL. Well, shit out of luck. Well, let's not think of it that way, right? SOL. Let's think about it in the nice way. Sol, okay? The sun. He always moves on the ecliptic. And in astrology, we have to know a little bit about astronomy as well as astrologers. And the ecliptic is the apparent path of the sun around the earth as viewed from earth. Now, we know that we are actually rotating around the sun, right? The sun isn't rotating around the earth, we are rotating around it. But from our vantage point on earth, the sun is making a path around us from us looking up. And that path that the sun is making around the earth is called the ecliptic. And as the sun travels through the ecliptic, it's making conjunctions with different fixed stars and constellations. So it's running into the constellation of Pisces, it's running into the constellation of Aries, it's running into the constellation of Taurus. And that's as we're watching the sun move through the sky, as it moves throughout the entire year. The sun is traveling the path of the ecliptic. And one thing we need to know about the sun's qualities is that it is true, blessed, and good. That is because the sun always follows that path of the ecliptic. It never goes off of it. It never goes out of bounds. It never goes retrograde. The sun is always direct, and it's always following that path along the ecliptic. And that's where we can really talk about how the sun is very, true and good and direct and, reliable, right? The sun is very reliable and true and direct and never retrograde and, has all of these positive qualities as a result of how it is moving on the ecliptic. The sun is also like the leader because it is defining the boundaries of the ecliptic for the other planets, which may go in or out of bounds. And in that way, the sun is also like the leader of the planets, if you will. And so in astrology, the sun borrows those qualities of being a leader, of being the one to carve out the path, of being the one who is reliable, who's always direct, who's always, straightforward, who's always clarity, all of that are very much associated with that sun energy. Now, we know people who are, who are more of the negative solar archetypes and who are very selfish and narcissistic and me first all the time. And we know that there is always duality in our world. So we know we have that duality aspect there too. But the true nature of the sun is always to be, blessed and always to be moving forward and always to be good. These are the true qualities of the sun. And we know that the sun is at home in Leo. The sun is in detriment in Aquarius, okay? And the sun is exalted in Aries, particularly at 19 degrees Aries. And the sun is in fall in Libra, okay? And I have here, the sun is always direct and never retrograde. The sun is hot and dry, but more temperate than Mars. So Mars is also a hot and dry planet, but it is very, very, very hot. Whereas the sun is hot and dry as well, but not as bad as Mars is, okay? Meaning it's not as much of a hothead as Mars is. As we know, Mars is can be confrontational, angry, energy, warlike, and the sun is hot and dry too, energetic, up and moving, motivated, but it doesn't have as much of that warlike quality like Mars does, okay? And Sun is also a masculine and diurnal planet. Diurnal just means as of the daytime. And oh, Golden Child Tarot says you're concerned as an Aquarius sun. Oh, well, don't be concerned because, we need the Aquarius people here to keep the Leos in line. Like, if we did not, all joking aside, if we didn't have our Aquarius people in here reminding the Leos, hey guys, I feel like the Aquarians are the ones that, and I would say Scorpios, Tauruses, and Aquarians are the ones that can really check the Leos, but particularly the Aquarians. So we need the Aquarians here to keep the Leos in line, okay? But as the ancients would say, and I have a picture of the sun here, big fiery ball of yellow and red and beautiful, heating our world and giving us light and hope in the darkness and everything that the sun is, okay? And when the ancients wrote about the sun, they wrote that the sun speaks with great confidence and command. The sun can be arrogant and proud, disdaining of all men, like, I'm the best, not you, right? Disdaining of all men, life-bringing and gleaming, a sensible person, wise, understanding, reason and intellect, strength, victory, fame and beauty, all associated with the sun. He impedes any who are conjoined to him, okay? So that is an interesting point. The sun impedes any who are joined to him. Now, that means when other planets come close to the sun, they are impeded. And that's because the sun is so powerful and hot and, magnificent and bright and shining and all of that, that when other planets get close, like here's my sun, bright and shining, when other planets start getting close to it, they're like, ooh, it's too close. Ooh, I got burned, right? I got a little too close to the heat. And ooh, I got burned, or ooh, it's too much, or ooh, the brightness, I can't take it. I better move away a little bit, okay? I like being near the sun because it makes me feel warm and happy and everything. But if I get too close to it, it's like, ooh, I got a little too close there, right? So when planets get a little too close to the sun, they experience something called combustion. And we'll talk about that later. About what that means. And, something you can be thinking about when we talk about that later is, do I have any planets in my chart that are too close to the sun? Are they within like 8 degrees of the sun? Are they too close to it? And therefore in combustion with the sun, which just means that their power is getting zapped, because it's too close to the big daddy of them all, the sun, right? So you get a little too close to that power source and you start, short circuiting out because you're getting too close to the sun, okay? So those are some things to think about in your own chart. Do I have planets that are in conjunction with my sun that are very close to it? Or that are even within 17 degrees of it or 8 degrees of it. And we'll talk more about that later, but that's something to keep in mind, that the sun has a very strong effect on other planets that approach it or are moving away from it. So we have to think about that too. And it says, whomever is approaching the sun. So whatever planet is approaching the sun will have no memory nor no trace of that planet appear. Okay, so the sun is so powerful that it makes the other planets like kaput. Okay, and a signifier, the sun is a signifier of fathers if the nativity is in the daytime. Okay, and the sun represents the commanding voice and the forcefulness of power. Okay, so very regal energy we have with the sun. And and we know that the sun is in fall in Libra, exalted in Aries, okay? And I always tell people, when you're thinking about the sun and moon, they are exalted in Aries and Taurus, but in fall in Libra and Scorpio. So that is a very interesting fact to think about. And if your sun is in Libra, it doesn't mean you're doomed to a life of hiding in a corner. In fact, a lot of like Sun and Libra people are very popular and charming and, good at diplomacy, good at bringing connection between people, good at networking, good at making connections, etc. So, it doesn't mean that, but the sun itself is actually, when it moves into Libra, is going down, 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 and getting ready to basically die in the winter. And the sun is like going down, down, down to its death once it hits Libra season. And then after December, after the winter solstice in December, then the sun starts going up, 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 up again. Okay, so just keeping that in mind as we think about it. Now, I wanted to show you guys the glyph of the sun. So when you're looking at, like an astrology software, or looking at your astrology chart in particular, and you're like, I can't tell where my sun is on this damn chart. Like, I'm looking at it. It's got all these symbols all over it. Where is my sun, right? You want to look for, it's really easy to find, right? In your chart, if you look for the circle with the dot in the middle of it. And I think that we could meditate on that for like 10 hours if we wanted to. A circle with a dot in the middle of it. And as we know, a circle is basically undifferentiated energy. A circle is just, chaos. It's undifferentiated energy. It's everything. When you have just a circle by itself, everything within it is just jumbled within it. But when you put a dot in the middle of the circle, that is when we have an individual being identified out of the chaos, right? We've got that dot in the middle. And that dot in the middle is really, really important because it identifies me as an individual. It identifies you as an individual, which is what the sun does. And the sun is called the eye of the world. Isn't that beautiful? The eye of the world. And you know what? That glyph actually looks like an eye, which is even, more fascinating when you look at it, because it looks like an eye with a pupil in the middle of it, right? So I love that view of like the sun glyph as being kind of the eye of the world. And, the circle with the dot in it is the definition of an individual. Like, there's all these other dots within the circle, but here I am in the middle as me, myself, right? And the sun is the king of the planets and the eye of the world. The sun is the fountain of life and the constant in everything. Okay, the sun is the constant energy in everything. Versus the moon, which is ever changeable and not constant, right? The sun is the dot in the middle of the circle and constant and fixed. The sun does not waver, okay? The sun represents concrete individuation. And when we're in a physical body on the earth plane, we need concrete individuation. We need to be able to identify where we end and other people begin. It's pretty critical since we have a body. But I know, it's nice to lose ourselves in the sea of chaos and be like, woo, and kind of turn it all off and just go into the waves of it all, right? But when we're talking about the sun energy, we're not talking about doing that. We're talking about, here I am in the middle, and, here's everyone else, and here's me. And that particular energy. Okay, so the sun is never changing and ever constant. It does not retrograde. Like other planets go retrograde, you're never going to find a retrograde sun. Maybe in another universe, right? Maybe on another planet. Maybe we'll all become, like Star Trek and travel around in the universe in our ships, and we'll find a retrograde sun. somewhere. But our sun does not retrograde. And the sun represents the one and the all. The sun is the beginning of differentiation. Okay. And when we're in chaos and when we're in pure nature and pure chaos, nature can say no and take action against itself. But once we put that dot in the center, we've given birth to the I maker or the me of it all. And that does crystallize something within the heart of chaos. That dot in the center is what is that crystallization in the heart of the chaos, okay? And sun is form and the power of individuation, while the moon preserves the mother and expresses the material in the universal and is constantly changing. The sun represents the power of the individual. And in the astrology chart, the sun often does indicate father, or can be like a significator for the father as well, where the moon would be the indicator for the mother. So just wanted to give you guys a little bit of that. And here's a little treat for those of you that follow the tarot and you love tarot. You know, in the tarot, there is the sun card, which is card number 19 in the major arcana. And in the tarot, we see the child, the sun child, riding the horse bareback with nature behind it. We see a wall, and then we see a bunch of flowers and vegetation behind it. And what that really is, what that wall represents, is it means that nature is kept chaos, or nature is kept behind the wall, which allows the individual to burst forth and to be the sun child and to be the joyous child proclaiming, this is me, this is who I am, this is what I'm meant to be, okay? While chaos is kept behind the child, in the background, behind the wall. And yeah, I wrote here, sun card in the tarot, nature, chaos is kept behind the wall. And that allows the true self to come forward. And so in that, the true self is beaming. The true self is joyful. The true self is proud, naked, self-assured, open, without obstruction or reservation. And that is a fabulous definition of the sun card in the tarot. And I love the sun card too, because I mean, it is associated with joy and prosperity, but it's also associated with creativity, being like, here I am, this is me, I'm not afraid to let myself shine, this is my true self without, you know, any pretending or any flexing or any, like, this is truly who I am and what I'm here to be. And I'm here to embrace all of life and who I am, you know, and that is really the definition of the sun card. And Holly says, that's an interesting point. I wonder if either sun would retrograde in a binary system. Holly, you and me both, right? We're like, where is that other universe with a retrograde sun? Where can I find that? Can I go there? Can I visit it? Where is it at, right? Yeah, so the sun card in the tarot is a great picture in your head of what the sun is like. And if you think about somebody that has a debilitated sun, or a sun that is very hard, has very hard aspects to it, and you're doing astrology, you could think of the tarot card, the sun card, like reversed. What happens when we reverse that, right? We get pulled back into the heart of chaos. We lose who we are. We can't find ourselves anymore in the chaos, right? And I mean, we've all had those moments in our life when things are just extremely chaotic in our lives. And it's like, I'm losing who I am. Like you know, there's a lot of women that talk about like perimenopause. You know, you start going through perimenopause in your 40s, and they talk about, I don't know who I am anymore. I don't recognize myself anymore. Okay. And that is like nature eating itself, right? And it's like the dragon is consuming itself. And you're like, I'm losing myself in the chaos. I don't know who I am anymore. And there's a reason the sun is associated with youth and energy and vigor. And, here I am, because it takes energy and motivation to want to crawl out of the heart of chaos, right? If you're laying on your couch and you're covered in potato chips and you're watching your favorite TV show and you take a big old swig of your lemonade and then pass out for another 30 minutes and you're just swimming in a ball of whatever, it takes energy to get up off that couch and go, you know what? I'm going to go paint. You know what? I'm going to go for a walk. You know what? I'm going to go, whatever, right? And it takes energy to show up fully as in our own skin, proud of who we are, proud of what we're doing, right? And, I think as people age, we find where it's a little bit harder to do that. And I feel like sometimes as we age, it's like, okay, I'm losing my youth, or I'm losing who I am, right? As REM would say, that's me in the corner. That's me in the spotlight, losing my religion, okay? And yeah, and the Golden Child Tarot would say that would be terrifying to... Yeah, you know what, Golden Child Tarot, perimenopause is no joke, my friend. I don't want to scare anybody, but I mean, it is a big thing. Little Lean says that in that chaos energy, is it? How can one go back our shadows or the moon archetype so we can alchemize from that? Yeah, Little Lean, thank you for your comment about that too, because going back into the chaos isn't necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes it's highly creative. Sometimes it is highly, you can feel lost sometimes in that chaos, but, maybe you go back into that chaos and you bring your shadow qualities to the surface and you reemerge stronger and more vibrant than ever before, right? Like, it doesn't have to be a forever thing if we feel like we're getting lost in the chaos, right? And sometimes, being lost in the chaos can be very creative as well, a creative experience. And, one thing I wrote here is humans experience a lot of shame in being completely open and honest and self-realized. Okay. And in, in an Indian system, which I've also studied, like Vedic astrology, the sun is really connected to our solar plexus. And I know people that have been through like a lot of abuse in life and have been beaten down a lot in life. Like, that solar plexus can really take a beating, and people can feel very bad about simply wanting to be themselves and express who they are. And some people try to tentatively like take a step to express themselves, but are like, degraded by other people in the process of doing that. And so they pull back and they're afraid. These are all very like sun issues that can come up in our astrology chart if we're having a tough transit to our sun. Maybe we've always been comfortable with who we are, but recently not feeling it. Recently feeling not good, like feeling maybe somebody made us feel very like, lost within ourselves or took away our confidence, right? And so those are some things that we can look at like transit wise, even in our chart, that are happening, that where we can be like, wait a second, I usually am very like happy to be myself, but lately I haven't felt that way, so we've got that. And the sun is very like motivated and energetic and cheerful about its progress in life. And that's a very positive expression of the sun. But we can also see the more, like negative expression of the sun, where I remember I wanted to tell you guys a story of going on a date one time years ago. And the guy knew that I was he knew that I was an astrologer and a tarot reader and all of that. And we sat down to have dinner. And he was like, oh, so it's so cool that you like do astrology and you do tarot and all this. It's really cool. And he just looked me dead in the face and was like, tell me about myself, right? Tell me about myself. And you guys, he looked me dead in the face and said, tell me about myself. And I mean, I was like, Are you kidding me? I literally almost fell out of my chair and let the ground swallow me and teleport me into another dimension at that point. Because I was like, I'm on a date. I'm not working right now. I'm not doing a reading for you. I'm not, it's not in the middle of my work day. I'm the goal of a date is for you to tell me about yourself, and I'll tell you about myself. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you about yourself, you know? And I literally, I felt like nails on a chalkboard. I was like, down a chalkboard. And if I was, turned into a cat at that moment in my life, I would have swatted at him with my paw because I was like, yeah, no, yeah, not gonna tell you about yourself, okay? So that is, and truth be told, sometimes people do that in a very childlike and guileless way. Like they're not saying it to be self-centered, they're not saying it to be rude or anything. They're just genuinely like, tell me about myself. But it's, very inappropriate date behavior. And anyway, I forget. I don't know. I never saw that guy's chart, nor did I ever tell him about himself. But, some people are very passionate and excited to learn about themselves, which is very good. It's good to be passionate and to learn about yourself. And if you're going to be an astrologer or a tarot reader, then you want to be passionate about other people as well and finding out who they are and finding out about their experiences and, what they're up to in the world, right? But some of that, like, tell me about myself behavior can be kind of childish at times or immature at times. And, if you've ever been to any type of like meetup event or any event at all, you always have those certain people who kind of break the ice and who are very like forward and direct. And they're like, hi, I'm so and so, right? Which is very like sun energy. But if you've ever been to like a metaphysical event or an astrology event and it's a learning event or learning about your chart event, there inevitably will be that person who kind of walks into the room. It's probably an Aries or a Leo or somebody like that, but they'll walk into the room and they'll be like, the first thing out of their mouth, they walk into a room with other people in it and they'll be like, tell me about myself, you know? Awesome. Like, I'm here at this event and this is going to be really fun. They walk into the room, throw back their hair and say, tell me about myself, right? And that is that is very like sun behavior, to walk in and kind of be like commanding this energy, and everybody kind of laughs, right? Everyone's like, oh, ha ha ha, laugh laugh. It kind of like breaks the ice. But and the sun is very playful and energetic and does represent like a child like rushing in, and we need that kind of fun, playful, energetic energy, that notice me, look at me, tell me about me type of energy. And it can be fun and it can break the ice and help more people who are like a little bit shyer come out of their shells a little bit. But if it gets to be too much in group situations, if people are like hogging the spotlight or making it constantly all about them, then that's when, things can get a little bit much. Yeah, Holly's covering her face. She's like this. About the Holly, have you ever done that, or do you get the cringe feeling when that happens? I always get a cringe feeling when that happens. I'm like, oh no. I mean, on one hand, I'm happy because they're happy to be there, right? A person's happy to be there, they're energetic, they're excited, they're motivated, and they're going to bring the energy up of the room. And you know that there's not going to be dead silence, right? So on one hand, it's like, okay, cool, right? But on the other hand, sometimes it's like, oh my God, like, yikes, the old tell me about myself, right? So, but if I am your astrologer, it is my job to tell you about yourself. And more importantly, it's my job to listen to you, tell me about yourself, and then help you in whatever way I can, right? So those are sun card things. And like I said, it's not necessarily unhealthy to want to know about yourself, by all means. But so I just thought that that was very like sun card, like walking into the room and being like, tell me about me, you know? And no shame. A lot of times, you know, they could be doing it as a joke or to be funny or to break the ice, or they just genuinely want to know about themselves, but there's really no shame in their game. Where the rest of us sometimes like walking into a room full of people and saying that we wouldn't even, we're like slipping into the room, like going to the back, and we're like, okay, you know, that type of energy. And yeah. And Pinky says, hello, everyone. You have Sun in the fourth opposite your moon. And yeah, definitely. Holly is saying that's definitely cringe, especially on a date. Yeah, it was when that guy was like, oh, that's so cool. Tell me about myself. And I was like, yeah, no, not today. It was so funny, though. I laughed, but I was like, yeah, no. Pinky says it's a lot. Yeah. And yeah, the sun is the happiest card in the tarot deck and wants everyone else to be energized and hopeful and optimistic and upbeat too. And so, on that note of, you know, like notice me, look at me, watch me, pay attention to me, on that note, I wanted to present to you guys the chart of Doja Cat, who is a singer songwriter, very, you know, popular. I think she's in her late 20s, I want to say early 30s, late 20s. Very popular singer songwriter, and you know, very much like the artist for sure. Very into fashion, okay, and I wanted to show you guys. She has Sun in Libra in the first house in the in a conjunction with her ascendant, and she has a song called look at me, you looking, look at me, I'm naked, vulnerability earned me a lot of bacon. Okay, that is one of her, you know, raps. But she basically has a song where it's like she's walking down the street and she's like, look at me, look at me, look at me, you looking, like that type of thing. And you know, part of it is everyone is looking at her, and she has like a huge social media following, and she's known to go live and like do wild stuff when she goes live, like shave her head or shave her eyebrows or do stuff like that. I actually did Doja Cat's chart on my channel and analyzed her chart in detail. If you're curious, you can find it under my playlist of celebrity charts. But you know, depending on what house system you use, she may have a 12th house sun or a first house sun. Okay. Because her sun is right above her ascendant in Libra there. And, you know, Doja Cat was actually born 3 days before a total solar eclipse at 0 degrees Scorpio. So she is an eclipse baby. Plus, she has sun in the first house, which is very much notice me, look at me, notice me. Like, you know, I like the attention. I'm not afraid, like, to get out on stage and shake my butt. I don't have stage fright. I'm not, you know, I'm good. Like, if you're going to pay attention to me and look at me, that's good. And, you know, you can also say that she is a person who has, you know, that being herself and being allowed to be herself and express herself artistically with the Libra rising there is very important to her. Very, very important to her. But I also wonder, because she has her Sun in Libra squaring Neptune and squaring Uranus, that especially with the Neptune, if at times, you know, particularly if she didn't get a good, I know her father was absent a lot of the time while she was growing up, and if there's just a part of her heritage or a part of her background that's kind of missing there, and therefore it's made it even more important for her to carve out an identity of who she is. And I know that she, you know, she has the sun squaring Uranus, so she is very rebellious too as well. Like, she really does like to push the edges, especially in fashion and beauty, of what looks good, and she likes to try a lot of new things, and she likes to change her appearance like all the time too. And, that could be her at artistically looking for her identity. And maybe part of that identity, was lost, or she didn't really know who she was as a child or growing up. That piece was missing because her dad was gone some of the time. And, that solar eclipse that happened a few days before she was born. But also, too, I think expressing herself and expressing who she is on a very strong level is very important for her. And, her sun's in the conjunction with the North Node there. So she's very bold and brave and out there about expressing who she is. And, she has a stellium there in Libra. Stellium is a collection of planets, more than 3 planets in the same sign. And she's got multiple, she's got her ascendant, her sun, the North Node, Mercury, and Chiron all in Libra. And to me, I kind of read that in the first house as like, I woke up and I was me, the ascendant, and immediately I needed to know who I was. Okay, Sun conjunction the ascendant. And I felt like things were faded in my life, and I felt like there were missing pieces, but I had an unquenchable hunger and thirst to explore myself. Sun Rahu conjunction. And then Mercury, I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to write about it. I wanted to, part of who I am is sharing my thoughts and sharing what I'm feeling. And Mercury Chiron conjunction, I process, my pain through writing and through lyrically. I process my pain and but not just my pain. I also process who I am and what I know about myself. And I process that through writing and the process of writing as well. But I also feel with that Mercury Chiron conjunction is receiving hurtful messages about who she is as a person, that makes her want to fiercely defend herself even more with regard to who she is. So I think that is a very interesting energy with Doja Cat, with her sun and the ascendant there. And yeah, and you're saying Doja Cat is a Libra queen. Yes, she is, Pinky. And her dad didn't have contact with her until adulthood. And she said he left comments on her Instagram after she got super famous. Yeah, the thing with her dad, with the solar eclipse right before she was born. And, this feeling, she had this solar eclipse right before she was born. And this feeling of, I have to keep, especially with the moon opposite Saturn, right? Because then we go even further back into it and we can see where there's, insecurities or vulnerabilities. And, with the moon opposite Saturn from the 12th to the 6th house, you have to wonder, like, has she struggled with depression? Has she struggled with, is she using bravado, like Sun in the first house? Bravado, right? Is she using bravado in order to cover up feelings of emptiness? Moon opposite Saturn, okay? Is she using bravado to cover up the things that have hurt her? And, feeling open and attacked and vulnerable. Moon in the 12th house in Virgo. Feeling like she can't fail or make any mistakes because people are going to, make fun of her or laugh at her. And even as famous as she is, right, she has this moon opposite Saturn where you have to wonder, does she feel quite lonely or isolated at times, even though she is very famous? And she does have a lot of fun, being herself and being an artist and expressing herself artistically. Is there an emotional aspect there that feels very heavy for her? She is an amazing entertainer and she is super talented. The sun in her chart rules the 11th house of audience and support and people cheering for her. And she said, vulnerability earned me a lot of bacon. Look at me, I'm naked. Okay, sun in the first house with her ascendant. Vulnerability earned me a lot of bacon. The 11th house is also the house of profits from your business. So it's like, yeah, being that vulnerable and being that naked and being that much myself earned me a lot of money and earned me a lot of applause and a lot of bacon. But it is like constant attention on her all the time. Um, yeah. And, with her, her audience gives her the attention she needs, but they don't always, sun square Uranus, like, I don't like the way you're changing. I don't like the way you're doing things. Like, there's a lot of things with her supporters that have kind of gone down there too. And, with Sun square Uranus, she has a unique way of expressing herself, not going with the rules, shaving her head and eyebrows on a live. She has a very unique style of expressing herself, which she is constantly changing, Sun square Neptune, and finding new ways to express herself. And one of her lyrics in her song was like, "Damn, let me just be proud of myself. You're always watching me to see if I'll fail or fall." Okay. So Ascendant Sun, damn, let me be proud of myself. Let me enjoy who I am. Let me be proud of what I've done here. But you guys are always waiting and watching for me to fall. Okay. Moon in the 12th house opposite Saturn. And so, yeah, I think that's interesting. She is a very solar person with the sun in her first house. And her fans love to give her attention too. But her fans are also very, very close to her, right? If we think of the 11th house as being our supporters or our fans, they're right in a conjunction with her ascendant. And at times, maybe she feels smothered by that, or she feels like it's too much, So there is a lot there going on for Doja Cat, and just wanted to share some of her chart with you guys before we move on to the next one. And I wanted to talk a little bit about Indian astrology as well, as I do have a background in Indian astrology, and I think that they have really good things that we can learn. The photo here that we can see is a picture of Surya, who is the Indian god for the sun. He is called Surya, and his name means supreme light. His day is Sunday. He's royal and fiery. He stands alone because he's too hot to enjoy a marital relationship. Okay, and that's strictly coming from Indian astrology. Like, he's too hot to enjoy a marital relationship. It's hard for the sun to have a companion because he is so bright, because he is so filled with light, and he's royal and fiery. So it's hard to find someone, right? And strong solar charts oftentimes have an element of loneliness in them, because people can't get too close due to the great heat that they radiate. And I wonder about that with Doja Cat too. I mean, she has that sun ascendant, but then the moon opposite Saturn. And I did write that for her. Like, are there times when she felt lonely, or she felt people didn't understand her, or felt lonely? And the colors associated with the sun are yellow, orange, and a soft red color. And here we can see Surya, basically spinning the universe on his finger there. And in Vedic astrology, the sun, or Surya, is pictured with 7 white horses, which represent the 7 colors of visible light and the 7 days of the week. And the sun is associated with light, and the eyes in particular. And as we know, that the sun glyph actually looks like an eye that I showed you guys before. So in medical astrology, if there are afflictions to the sun or to the moon, because the sun and the moon are associated, the sun with the right eye and the moon with the left eye for men, and then it's reversed for women, where women have the left eye for the sun and the right eye for the moon. So the sun and the moon basically control the eyes. And so if the sun and moon are debilitated in the chart, there can be issues with the eyes, or by transit too. There can be issue. I know in my solar return chart in 2023, Mars was on top of my moon. And during that year, my right eye, I got a huge floater in my right eye, and my vision in my right eye just started, to get kind of fuzzy from that floater, that I had in my eye. And it was in that year, that solar return, where Mars was on top of my natal moon. And of course, in women, the right eye is the moon. And the left eye is the sun. And for men, it's reversed. And so in medical astrology, it is very important to pay attention to the sun and the moon and what's happening to them by transit and in the natal chart, because it can indicate things happening to the eyesight, and which, can be challenging. And as you get older, yeah, stuff does start happening with the eyes for sure. So next, I want to talk a little bit more in Vedic astrology, or Indian astrology, what the sun does represent. And in Indian astrology, the sun represents the eternal soul, health, vitality, father, government, royalty, the ruling powers, the will to live, urge to rule. Okay, it also can symbolize, on the other hand, lack of vitality, determination or lack of determination, authority or problems with authority. We all know people who have, some issues with authority. Sun Uranus people, like for me in my own chart, I have sun opposite Uranus. Man, I like to break the rules when I was younger. And yeah, I did have a lot of issues with like authority and issues. Not so much authority, but more about having to conform and be the same as other people. I really couldn't stand that when I was younger at all. And, Sun Uranus people oftentimes do not like being told that they have to follow what everyone else is doing. It's like, yeah, no, thank you. Not going to do it. And, yeah. And so Holly says third decan Libra, she likes speed and audacious communication. Oh, yeah. Holly, that is very true. And about her, she does like that. And, Libra isn't always like a nicey nice goody two shoes sign either. And so I talked a little bit about that in the natal chart reading that I did for her on the channel. Libras are always, oh, goody two shoes, relationships, nice to everyone. No, not always. That's not always a thing. She likes speed, yeah, and I think the audacious communication is definitely there too, with the Mercury. Whoa! Did you guys hear that? Whoa! That was a jet that just flew over very, very closely. I literally just saw it out of my bedroom window. A little too close for comfort there, guys, but as we were. And so, yeah, we all know those people that do not like, authority or being told what to do or told that they have to conform. The sun in medical astrology also has to do with the heart, ego, our circulation of our blood and the heart as well. And so, yeah, those are some significators for the sun in the chart. And for those of you that have, Sun Neptune can weaken the ego and the vitality. Saturn can create, disappointments with ego and vitality, can create depression and negative vitality. Saturn can definitely do that, especially if there's Sun-Saturn issues in the chart. It doesn't mean... I think we have to be careful in astrology of just saying, oh, the Sun Neptune is horrible, or the Sun Saturn, you're doomed for life. We got to be careful of making those kind of pronouncements, but they can certainly create issues. And, the issues aren't always there right away. Sometimes, we live a pretty long lifetime if we're lucky enough, right? And a lot of those issues can come up later, or they come up in early life and then they don't really come up later, or they come up later in life when we're dealing with issues of vitality and stuff like that. And Kristen, hi Kristen, nice to see you on the chat. Kristen is saying, I have Sun and Mercury in Aries in the 10th house in Vedic. Nice. That is a very robust combination. And that is very much, Kristen, that is the astrology of somebody who should be an entrepreneur for sure. I'm the boss. I'm running things. Okay. And the sun is exalted in Aries too. And, Mercury and Aries about communicating things in the most, efficient way to accomplish the goal or accomplish the objective. And not taking no for an answer. Mercury and Aries, like, I'm not going to take, when it comes to my goals and my dreams and what I'm trying to manifest in my life, I'm not going to take no for an answer. I'm going to keep, going for what I want. No one can stop me. Rah, rah, rah. And I love that. That's good. Yeah. So, so many things, right? So many things to think about. Now, someone had actually emailed me and asked me if I could talk a little bit about Dave Grohl's chart. And I may do a total breakdown on his chart and do like the whole thing. But I did want to bring it up here during this Sun lecture. And he has been in the news recently. So now we're switching from Doja Cat over to Dave Grohl. And Dave Grohl is the drummer. He was the drummer for the band Nirvana. And he is also like the lead person for the band The Foo Fighters. And have you guys heard of Dave Grohl? Do you know who he is? You can throw it in the chat if you know who Dave Grohl is. But anyway, he was famously in Nirvana, and then he formed his own band, The Foo Fighters. And Dave has recently been all over the news because he was kind of like everyone's favorite dad, like he was like the good guy. And he's married for like 21 years, and he has three daughters, and he has a good band, and he didn't go down the destructive rock and roll path of live fast and die young. He's a Capricorn rising, sun in Capricorn. Okay. So again, we have another chart of someone who has the ascendant conjunction their sun, just like Doja Cat has her ascendant conjunction her sun in Libra. Dave Grohl has his ascendant in Capricorn in a conjunction with the sun in Capricorn. And, he's like everyone's favorite dad. Now, he was always like the more grounded one. I actually did Kurt Cobain's chart on my channel, and it's under celebrity readings if you want to check that out. But Dave Grohl is, kind of been around for a long time. I think he's now he was born in 1969. So what is he? He is in his 50s now. He's coming up on his second Saturn return, actually, because he has Saturn in Aries. And next year, Saturn will move into Aries. So he is, in his later 50s. And Dave Grohl, yeah, a lot of people were really disappointed in him, and I'm sure his family was too, because some news came out recently that he had fathered a child out of wedlock with a mistress, and he made a post on Instagram like, I'm very sorry to my family, I'm seeking their forgiveness, I'm going to be a father to my daughter. I did have an affair. There was a secret child out of wedlock, and I am going to take care of the child, and I am asking my family for forgiveness. Okay. And a lot of people were very like, what? When that news came out, because it kind of destroyed his image of being a down-to-earth, responsible father. Now, when we talk about, sun is a significator for father, and it can represent, in our own chart, our own father. The aspects that are made to our sun can represent, the relationship with our own father. Like if we have sun square Neptune, it could be an absent or a missing father, or a father who was into psychedelics or drugs or drinking or things like that. Okay, so when we look at the sun and that's just one example, right? So when we look at the sun in the chart, it is a significator for many other things besides just the father. It can be a significator for how we react to authority, to how we respond to leadership, to how we deal with challenges to our authority, right? Like the sun can show all of that in our chart if we look at where it is, what sign it's in, and what aspects it is making. Well, in Dave Grohl's chart, he has Sun in Capricorn in a conjunction with his ascendant. So his image is really about being that down to earth father. You know, hey, I'm a dad to 3 daughters, and he tells he had an interview and he said, I tell my 15-year-old daughter, hey, you've got time. You don't need to go get that tattoo now. Like, think about it. Wait and think about it. Like, he's kind of coming across as like sensible, wisdom, you know, good dad, sturdy father figure. You know, he said one of his comments was, I will not worship the live fast and die young mentality. Basically saying he's here for longevity, which is very Saturnian. Okay, Sun in Capricorn. I'm here for longevity. I'm not doing I want to have good health and good vitality in my life. Okay, Sun in the first house. I don't want to die early. Like Kurt. He didn't say like Kurt, but you know, he's like, I don't want to die early. I don't want to live fast and die young. I will not worship that mentality. I'm going to be, you know, careful with my vitality and my health, which, you know, seems like a very responsible Saturnian way to live your life and to not get caught up in the whole rock star thing. And so I think that, yeah, and thank you so. Kristen says, "Oh, you're welcome, Kristen." And Return to Sender popped. Hi, Return to Sender. Hey there. And says, I never liked him. Yeah, there's a lot of people that said like Courtney Love had made comments about him that he sucked like a long time ago and that we just didn't listen to her. And I don't really know too much about him per se, so I don't really know what, you know, I haven't really formed an opinion on him per se, but I do think people like demonize Courtney Love way too much. Now, is Courtney Love is she possibly a really bad mother, or at times been a really bad mother? Absolutely, probably. But, you know, Courtney Love pre having a child, let's pretend, you know, I know we can't do that, but, you know, Courtney probably would have just been better if she just would have lived her life and been wild as she was. But I'm not going to go off on it because I know it's a hot topic and people get real inflamed about it. But I don't really have too much an opinion on Dave Grohl. I was just kind of interestingly watching what was happening and going, okay, like, you know, what is going on with the whole energy here, okay? And so right away when I looked at his chart, I was like, oh, he's got the Sun in Capricorn in the first house. Of course, he's coming across as this down-to-earth father figure. And, you know, the Sun is also about our image and about what image we're trying to project. But in his chart, his Sun is also making a square to Saturn in Aries. Okay, so that Sun in Capricorn is squaring the Saturn in Aries in the fourth house of family. So the whole signature of I have become a disappointment to my family is massively there. And, you know, it also talks about probably the difficult relationship he had with his own father. And when I saw that he had the Sun square Saturn and Saturn was in the fourth house of family, I started Googling his father because I was like, okay, you know, did he have a bad, disappointing relationship with his father? Did he have issues with his father? Now he's coming up on his second Saturn return next year. Saturn and Aries, and you know, he's obviously really disappointed his family with this whole, you know, child out of wedlock and everything. So I thought to myself, geez, okay. And come to find out, yeah, and Return to Sender says Kurt really didn't like him either. I had heard that. And Holly says he pulled a Schwarzenegger. Yeah, like came out of the blue, you know, had a child out of wedlock. Everyone's like, what's going on? His daughters understandably were very upset and like shut off their social media, and it was a big to-do, right? So Basically, with his father, I found out that his father really did not approve of him being a musician. His father was he had a very strict Republican father who was very concerned about him getting into the lifestyle of a musician. And he said it took a lot of time to earn his father's approval. And even when he was playing and doing a good job, like playing the drums and things like that, his dad would tell him stuff like, oh, just because you know how to play an instrument doesn't make you a musician. Like, would tell him stuff that was kind of challenging to hear, I'm sure. And him and his father, I think they made up and they ended up being okay. But his father definitely was not happy with who he was trying to become and how he was living, and his father was disappointed in him, and nothing says my father is disappointed in me like Saturn in the fourth house of family squaring the sun in the first house, like in Capricorn, right? And Saturn is in fall in Aries, so that's a difficult Saturn right there. And it is squaring his sun, and so it's like, yeah, a tough energy there. And that energy coming back to him at his second Saturn return now of disappointing the family. Not only did I disappoint my father, when I was a younger child, I dealt with feelings of disappointing my father or feelings of upsetting my father. And now as an adult and being a father myself, I'm now dealing with the issues of disappointing my family. And yeah, Saturn can definitely be a planet of, needing to get real about something in the ways that we have disappointed ourselves, disappointed other people, that type of thing. And so this whole thing kind of destroyed his image of being a down to earth, responsible father. I think it's interesting right now, too, because Saturn is currently retrograde on his natal Venus. And Venus rules his 10th house of reputation. So not only is he getting ready soon to have a Saturn return, which is going to reactivate that Saturn square, as he's trying to rebuild the relationship with his family, as he's trying to regain their approval. And he also has transiting Saturn on top of his natal Venus, representing his 10th house of career and reputation, hitting his 10th house planet there. And so, yeah, that is a problem, and that is affecting his, quote unquote, reputation and image. And yeah, so we have that going on there. And in his particular chart, the sun rules the eighth house for him of unexpected transformations. And the eighth house really can be challenging because things change, but we don't really have control over it. And we think that, we're locked in on something and that things are going to be good to go and stay that way forever. And then something comes along to change how other people see us or how we see ourselves. And so, yeah, that is a challenging aspect there. On one hand, Sun Saturn can be very good for keeping people sober, especially if you have a lot of addicts around you. Sun Saturn your moon or your sun squaring Saturn can actually be a really good reality check for not getting involved in it and keeping yourself away from it. And I've seen that multiple times in multiple charts. So it's interesting, he stopped smoking marijuana at age 20, and he never really did super hard drugs, or if he did, he never did them past the age of 20. So I think in a lot of ways that Saturn has been beneficial to him in the way that it's kept him very sober towards life. But on the other hand, there are these issues of family disappointment. I've disappointed my family. I disappointed my father. Okay. And, self-inflicted wounds of not being good enough are kind of coming back to kind of haunt him. And, there's a quote where he said that the reason why he doesn't do drugs is because drugs don't make him feel healthy or in control. And you can see that we have the Sun in Capricorn in the first house making a trine to the Pluto in Virgo. And so he's a person who likes to be in control. He's a person who likes to feel in control of his body, because the first house is also our body. And so it's like, I don't want to feel like out of control, or I want to feel like I'm in control. And I like being in control, so I don't really want to be doing any type of drugs, you know? So he definitely has that in his chart there with the Sun trine Pluto in Virgo. Drugs don't make me feel healthy or in control. And feeling in control of himself is an important goal and ambition for him. He also made a quote, "If you want to weather a career like I have done, you can't do shit half-assed," okay? And his midheaven is in a conjunction with Mars and Scorpio there. So it's like, if you want to be passionate and have a lot of drive and ambition about your career, then you've got to take steps towards your physical health to create longevity, if you want to keep pushing that hard when it comes to your career. And so I think that is in his chart very strongly, but also the but also the like Family Guy thing. Return to Sender said he always seemed fake to me. Yeah, that fakeness, if there is like a fakeness, it's gonna be getting exposed here at his second Saturn return. And and Saturn can really like humble the ego, right? So with that Sun in Capricorn, Saturn in Aries is definitely going to be checking him on that. And if he hasn't gotten the lesson of humility and living with reality and being honest with the people around you, then, he's definitely going to be receiving that message at his Saturn return. And we've got that going on in the chart. And I think there's something kind of funky with the moon in the 12th house representing the partner almost in a conjunction there with Neptune. If I was to break his chart down further, that's exactly where I would go for any type of fakeness or dishonesty, is probably that moon Neptune conjunction right there. So anyway, I just wanted to bring this up, and I feel very bad for his kids too, because the ruler of the 5th house is the Venus, representing his children, and that Saturn is retrograde on the ruler of his 5th house right now of this Venus. And so, his children are probably not too happy with him right now. And there's probably a lot of sadness there, I'm sure, about that from both ends of the spectrum. So definitely not trying to make light of anybody's situation here, but I do think that he is going to be feeling the heaviness of his actions over the next couple of years as Saturn is moving through Aries. And we've got that going on. And so I wanted to show you guys another Sun example there. And I've got a couple more examples, and then that will round us out for the day. And my next example that I wanted us to look at was the chart of Angelina Jolie, who is an actress and activist. Now, Angelina Jolie is an example. Now, we had 2 examples before of having Sun in the 1st house, right, with Doja Cat and Dave Grohl. Now, with Angelina Jolie, she does not have her Sun in the 1st house. Her Sun is in the 12th house, okay? And remember earlier when I started today talking about Sun in the 12th and how Sun in the 12th may need alone time, maybe doesn't need to be the center of attention all the time. Somebody who's more comfortable kind of maybe in the background, or somebody who needs their own time and space to reflect on things without everyone else around them. And someone who is also like very sensitive, particularly health-wise, okay? As we know that the Sun has to do with our vitality, and the 12th house can definitely drain out some of that vitality. And, oh, sorry. So Angelina Jolie has her sun at 13 degrees Gemini in the 12th house. Now, right away, you'll notice that that sun in the 12th house is opposite the Neptune in Sagittarius in the 6th house. You can see the opposition there. Let me go ahead. I will actually draw it on the screen here. You can see it. It's the sun opposite Neptune right there. Okay. And there we have it. So she has sun in Gemini opposite Neptune in Sagittarius. For her, the sun is ruling the second house of money for her. Okay. And the second house also has to do with our food, what we're eating, what we're using to support ourselves on a substance level. Okay. The second house is the house of money, food, everything that we need basically to stay alive and exist. Second house. Okay. And that sun is in the 12th house opposite Neptune. Now, for years and years and years, people has been saying that Angelina looks malnourished, sickly, and that she has like a very weak health. And for years and years, people have been saying, like going way, way back, I mean, back to the 90s, early 2000s, that she is anorexic or that, she's too skinny, this type of stuff. Now, and that she looks very weak and fragile because she is so skinny. And so I wanted to talk a little, and, obviously she gets very sick of people telling her that she is anorexic or too skinny, or, that there's something wrong with her, that she's a weak and frail and fragile person physically. Okay. And, she gets tired of that, I think, from articles that I've read about that, because she's like, I've been skinny. Even as a child, I had problems getting nourishment. And you can see she has Saturn in the first house squaring the moon. Okay. Moon squares Saturn. I have a problem getting nourishment into my body. Okay. I'm not anorexic. I don't have anything wrong with me. I just have a problem with getting nourishment into my body. And I have always been very skinny, and that's just the way that I'm built. What can I tell you? Okay. And so I think that has been very frustrating for her. And there has been times in her life when she has gotten very sick and ill as well, and where you've seen photos of her and pictures of her, and she does look very weak and frail, but she's telling people, hey, stop getting on my case about it. I'm not trying to be thinner. This is just me. This is how my body is, right? And Little Lean says, my son is in Capricorn too, and I can kind of understand why he did that. Kind of like self-fulfilling prophecy of never feeling enough and looking externally for happiness. I think you're right, Little Lean. Yeah. And not justifying his action, just trying to heal from inauthenticity. Yeah, I 1000% agree with you. I feel bad that the people in his life are hurt, but I agree with you. I think he's definitely gonna, the Saturnian stuff is tough. It really is tough. So Little Lean, I agree with what you're writing there. That does make sense. And Little Lean was talking about Dave Grohl's chart there. So for Angelina Jolie, it's interesting with her because people are always making comments about her weight. She's too skinny. She looks weak. She looks frail. But the hard part for her is that she has had a compromised immune system. She has been physically weak. And, as she was going through the divorce with Brad Pitt, she talked about how she is very sensitive physically. And that's the sun opposite Neptune. She said, my body, here's what she talks about her divorce with Brad Pitt and how emotionally terrorizing it was for her. But she said, my body reacts very strongly to stress, okay? My blood sugar goes up and down. I suddenly found I had Bell's palsy 6 months before my divorce. Okay. So, right before her divorce, she came down with Bell's palsy. Now, Bell's palsy is a neurological disorder. It happens in the face. Your face goes numb, it starts to droop, and it can be brought on by stress. And the sixth house in medical astrology is a house of stress and sickness, and the 12th house is having definitely a weak constitution. So it's not like she is a weak person in general, because I think she is very emotionally strong with the Mars Moon conjunction in Aries at the top of her chart there when it comes to children and defending her children and defending the weak and things, or just defending the people that she loves. I feel like she is, Moon Mars conjunction in Aries. Like, she's very strong emotionally, but physically, the stress of going through that divorce and going through everything really put her in a bad way. And when we see Sun Neptune, that can definitely indicate where there is compromised immunity, or there is some type of physical weakness or issue with vitality. And for her, because her sun is in Gemini, it can have to do with neurological issues. And Bell's palsy is a neurological issue. It's the facial nerve that is becoming compromised. And so, yeah, she had actually got Bell's palsy because of the stress and was having neurological symptoms because of it. And she did talk about how, stress really does affect her body in a major way, and that she is very, very sensitive. Her vitality is very, very sensitive. So I wanted to point out this example because the sun really does affect our vitality. And Angelina Jolie also made a quote. She said, "Sometimes women and families put themselves last until it manifests into their own health." Now, because her fifth house is ruled by Mars of children, and she's got a Moon Mars conjunction up in her 10th house, it's like, my children, being an advocate for children, my children are the most important thing. I put them first. When it comes to my children, I want to have endless energy. I want to be there for them. I want to stand with them. I want to be next to them. I want to fight for them. All of that. She is a fighter for children, for sure. She's an activist. And when it has to do with children. Now, when we talk about like putting ourselves last, and how women and families will oftentimes put themselves last and take care of themselves last, I really think her having sun in the 12th house is probably like, the sun is myself, right? It represents me. And if I put myself in the 12th house, it's like I put myself last, but I put my children, I put my advocacy, I put my work in the world, I put all of that ahead of everything else. And then I put me in my 12th house, and I put myself last, right? And so I think that is something that, and as you get older, right? I think Angelina Jolie's almost 50 now. As you get older, we can't just keep, putting ourselves and our health last, because it will catch up with us over time. And, those health issues do catch up. And so it is important to think about that. There's been some articles recently too, talking about Angelina's money and saying, like, is she running out of money? Because Brad Pitt has sued her over the sale of the vineyard, and all kinds of stuff going on, which I won't go into. But presently, Saturn is squaring her sun, okay? Because we have Saturn in Pisces right now at about 15 degrees Pisces. It is squaring her sun. And as I mentioned earlier, her sun rules her second house of money. So is Angelina Jolie having financial issues? If I was is it tied up in a foreign investment Saturn in the ninth house squaring the ruler of her second house of money, which is the sun, I would say, yeah, she is. It seems like to me she could be having financial issues. There's been some articles that have asked that very question. Is Angelina facing a cash crisis? Is she dealing with, money issues and stuff like that? Because of her divorce and the money being overseas and tied up in other different things. And I would say that, yeah, it kind of appears that way due to her chart. Okay. And the transit that she's having right now is Saturn squaring her sun. Now, I want to, as we round out here, we've got one more chart and one more concept to go over. One more thing I would like to talk about is the 3 different solar conditions. So I mentioned earlier in the webcast that there are times when planets can get too close to the sun. And, they're going towards the sun or they're moving away from the sun. But the point is they're a little too close for comfort. Because the sun is a very, big, magnificent, bright, shining energy. And when planets get close to it, it's like, boom, they get burned up by it. And so we want to really discuss some of these solar conditions that can happen when you have a planet in your chart that is getting way too close to the sun, and either by transit or natally. And those 3 solar conditions are combustion, Cazimi, and under the beams. Okay, and maybe you've heard of some of these terms before. I think the best way to understand them is through a little graph. Because let's pretend that this is the sun right here. Big yellow sun. Easy to see, right? I'll even highlight it for you guys. This is the sun right here, right? We know what it is. We know what it looks like. And let's pretend that these other 3 circles are another planet. So let's pretend this is Venus, okay? This is Venus here, and Venus here. Venus is just getting closer and closer to the sun, okay? Here, Venus would be considered under the beams, okay? And that means that Venus is 17 degrees before the sun or 17 degrees after the sun. And you have to be in the same sign. So that would be like if, for example, my Venus was at 10 degrees Scorpio and the sun was at 20 degrees Scorpio. That's a 10-degree difference there. That would be a Venus that is under the beams of the sun, okay? Let's see, Venus is getting even closer to the sun, okay? Venus is within 8 degrees of the sun. Venus is becoming combust the sun. And this is probably the worst of all of them, is the combustion. So Venus is getting even closer, inching even closer within 8 degrees. So let's see, Venus is at 5 degrees Scorpio and the sun is at, let's say, 10 degrees Scorpio, within 5 degrees of each other. That would be combustion. So Venus has gotten even closer. Now it's not just under the beams of the sun, it is combust the sun. Okay? Now let's see, Venus is getting even closer now. And Venus is within like 17 arc minutes of the sun. It's like pretty much on top of the sun. Then at that point, we have what's called a Cazimi. So Cazimi is good. I'm going to put a G there. Cazimi is good. Combustion is bad. And under the beams is bad. Okay, those are my weird colored B, B, G. Under the beams bad. Combustion bad. Cazimi good. Okay? And what we're talking about is Venus. In this example, we're talking about Venus. I just picked a planet, any planet. It works with any planet. I just picked Venus, okay? So in this example, we're talking about Venus coming closer and closer to the sun. When Venus is under the beams of the sun, it's bad. When Venus is combust the sun, it's bad. When Venus is close, very, very close and touching the sun, it's good. And when I'm saying bad, bad, good, like that, what I mean is it's bad for Venus. Okay, the sun is fine regardless. The sun is like, I am going to sun. I'm going to be me regardless of what other planet gets close to me or moves away from me. I don't care. But other planets that get too close to the sun are definitely going to be feeling the power of the sun. And when a planet starts to get within 17 degrees of the sun, that other planet is moving towards darkness and is feeling overpowered. That is the feeling of Venus when it is under the beams, okay? Now, as Venus is getting even closer and Venus is combust the sun, it means that Venus and all that Venus signifies in the chart is destroyed or burned up. So the combustion is even more intense. It's even worse, okay? But then we get to the Cazimi, and that's where Venus is so close to the sun that she just falls over into the lap of the sun and says, I'm here, hold me now, okay? And that's the Cazimi means in the lap of the sun. So at that point, Venus has just, conjunction the sun. She's fallen into the lap of the sun, and she's with the sun, and she's shining with the sun in the sun's radiance, and she sees everything clearly, and everything opens up to her, and she has 360-degree vision. And it's like in Willy Wonka, the snozberries taste like snozberries, and the da-da-das take like, it's that feeling. And you're like, whoa, I'm in the lap of the king. I'm in the lap of the sun. This is like really fun. And it only lasts for like 17 minutes of arc. And then boop, you're out of the lap of the sun and you're back to combustion. And then you're back, and then you're under the beams. And then finally you're gone and you're not under the influence of the sun. And so I wanted to bring up these solar conditions as it relates to the sun, because you may have planets in your chart that are under the beams of the sun, that are combust the sun, or are in a Cazimi with the sun, or you may be having a transit that reflects that. And if you're like, okay, I'm curious, I want to know, you can always book a reading with me and we can talk about these issues. If you're like, I want to know, do I have any planets combust the sun? Okay. And the reason why combustion is like probably, Cazimi lasts for such a short time. Yeah, it's cool, but it's like such a little short time. And it's really combustion that I feel is kind of the big thing. And that's because the ancients said that one of the three worst things that can happen to a planet is combustion, which is getting too close to the sun. So the three worst things that can happen to a planet are retrogradation, being retrograde, being combust, being way too close to the sun, or being in a cadent house, okay? Which is like that houses in your chart that have the quote unquote least power. That would be like the 3rd, the 6th, the 9th, and the 12th, if you're talking about cadent houses. Okay. So retrogradation, combustion, and cadency are three of the worst things that can happen to a particular planet. So that's why I wanted to point out particularly combustion is kind of a big one. And Holly says that for Angelina Jolie, that her dad is John Voight, and they had a strained relationships for many years too. Yeah. And yeah, definitely sun in the 12th house, absent father, not really, yeah, definitely not vibing with her on that level. Yeah. And you're right. She loved her mother. Angelina Jolie loves her mother, but doesn't, I don't know. I wish he was better. She actually seems like a sweet person. I try not to get involved, right? Like, I don't know these people, but I do kind of get energy off their chart. And I'm like, she seems like she's always been kind of a weirdo, but she's always, she seems like she's a good person. So it's kind of like, her dad does seem like, she was dealt a rough hand as it relates to her father with that energy. But yeah, I did want to talk about under the beams, combustion, and Cazimi, because these are important solar conditions that have to do with the sun. If there's no sun there, then none of these things apply, you know? So there has to be the sun there, and there has to be a planet that is getting ready to run into the sun or walk away from the sun. And so it's a pretty important concept in astrology. And, you know, if you study astrology on a deeper level, it's something that you will definitely talk about even more. And I wanted to bring up a chart that shows an example of combustion and under the beams, because I think it's interesting. And this will be my last chart for today. So if you guys have any questions, you know, now would be a time to start throwing them in if you've got them, as I'm going through this last one. And but I did want to show you guys like combustion and under the beams. So we are looking at the chart of Leonardo DiCaprio. And Leonardo DiCaprio is an actor. He was in movies like The Great Gatsby, Wolf on Wall Street, What's Eating Gilbert Grape, The Titanic was another one. You guys, if you know other movies he was in too, I think he's been in a lot of movies. You can throw them in the chat. Those are the three ones I can think off the top of my head. But he is like a famous actor. And with him, it's interesting. He has his sun at 18 degrees Scorpio. Okay. And he has Venus at 19 degrees Scorpio. Okay. And he also has Mars at 9 degrees Scorpio. So I'm going to highlight what I'm looking at for him. Okay. I'm looking at here. All right. I'm not counting the part of fortune, because the part of fortune, this little circle with the X in it, cannot technically be under the beams or combust the sun or anything like that, because it doesn't have a body. So I'm ignoring the part of fortune for the purposes of combustion or under the beams. Okay. So what I'm looking at is I'm looking at his sun in Scorpio at 18 degrees, his Venus in Scorpio at 19 degrees, and his Mars at 9 degrees. Okay. So in this particular example, Venus is combust the sun. Venus is not close enough to the sun to be considered Cazimi. So Venus is not sitting in the lap of the sun enjoying all the benefits. Venus is just on the outside and is getting burned up and getting burned alive by the sun. Now, what's interesting is, you know, this is a lot of scorpionic energy that he has, and Leonardo DiCaprio is famously doesn't give a lot of interviews, so it's kind of hard to find stuff about him. But Holly said he was in The Revenant. I haven't seen that, The Revenant, for Leonardo DiCaprio. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about because the Venus being, now not only is that Venus combust the sun, which means combustion, right? If we go, okay, what does combustion means? It means that it's getting totally burned up by the sun, and that the sun is destroying all of its significations. Now, we know that because he's a Libra rising, that Venus is the ruler of his ascendant. So Venus also represents, you know, him in the chart. So he is getting burned up by the sun. Now, what's interesting is that the sun also rules his 11th house of friends and supporters, okay? Now, a friend of his, now keep in mind, his friends are in his second house of money, okay? So the second house is the house of money. So my friends are in the second house of money, and it's overpowering me. It's overpowering my Venus, or me, which Venus rules my first house of me. Okay, so my friends' money is overpowering me, or my friends put money into what I'm doing, but somehow it destroys me, or it's not good for me. Now, what recently came out in the news in the last year is that one of Leonardo DiCaprio's like business friends put, I think it was over $20 million, I forget the dollar amount, into the making of the movie Wolf on Wall Street. But he put all this money into that movie, and Leonardo was one of the main actors in it. Very successful movie. But later down the road, they found out that that friend of his that financed that movie got the money illegally through international money laundering, and was a fugitive on the run, and finally got caught. And then Leonardo DiCaprio had to testify at a trial about his friend and his business, monetary business relationship with him, about his friend putting money into his movie Wolf on Wall Street, and how the money was laundered, and how Leonardo DiCaprio had no idea that the money was laundered, and thought that the man was a legitimate business person and a legitimate friend and business person, and how he had been vetted by all these people, but it still got past him. And he had taken laundered money and put it towards that movie. And, my friends taking their laundered money and giving it to me, okay, the ruler of my 11th house of friends and my second house of money, in a conjunction with me, but I'm getting burned up by the deal, okay? I'm Combust the Sun. I'm getting my ass burned by this deal, okay? It's not beneficial to me. I mean, yeah, I got to make my movie, but I had no idea that that was laundered money. What the heck is going on? Okay? So we've got that energy happening there with him, and the combustion between the Sun and Venus, and his friends and the friends with money, and he doesn't know where the money is coming from, and he's clueless, and he's just happy to have the investment, but at the end of the day, it ends up biting him. So there's an example of where a planet is combust the Sun, and that planet is in the dark and has no clue what's going on and is getting burned up by something. And yeah. And Killers of the Flower Moon. Yeah, that was another movie he's in. Thank you, Holly. I want to see that one. The Basketball Diaries. And let's not forget Inception. How can we forget it, right? Of course, Inception. And yeah, so that Venus is under the beams of the Sun. And, his relationships have also been under scrutiny. Like, he's very private. He doesn't like talking about, because Venus is also the planet of relationships. He doesn't like sharing his private business, but he goes out with a lot of really like young, sexy models. And, a lot of people have commented that when the model turns like 25, he dumps them because he wants to go out with people who are like 22, and he's like in his late 40s, early 50s, I think. So, there's some stuff going on with that Venus there. Now, Venus in Scorpio, as we know, is in detriment in Scorpio. So that's a tough Venus, because the Venus not only is in detriment in Scorpio, but it's also combust his Sun. Okay? So these placements are important when we're analyzing the Sun's relationship to other planets in the chart. Now, the other thing that is going on here is this Mars, okay? So Mars is under the beams. It's not combust. And remember how we talked about it earlier when I said that, let me see here, how I said under the beams is here, okay? Combustion is here. This is, under the beams is bad, but combustion is worse, okay? So we did talk about that. And now in this situation with the Venus, we know it's in detriment in Scorpio. It's combust the Sun. Not great for Venus in that situation. Mars, because it's 9 degrees away from the Sun, it's technically having a situation called under the beams, which is not great, but it's not the worst thing ever, okay? But the Mars is also in Scorpio. Mars loves to be in Scorpio. Mars is in home in Scorpio. Also, this is a night chart. So Mars is the lesser malefic. So the Mars actually has some good things going for it. And, the Mars rules his 7th house of partnerships as well. So, he's getting into these these partnerships with these very intense people. Okay, but he likes it. Maybe he likes it. Maybe he likes the intensity. Okay. And there is with the Mars, Sun, Venus, that's a lot of magnetic sexual tension and energy, it's like he likes it, you know. His Mars probably, like the women that he's with, they like the attention. They like that they think that he thinks that they're sexy, or there's something about the Mars where I feel like the Mars actually likes being under the beams, or maybe likes the attention, or maybe gets off on the attention. Maybe the women that he's with get off on the attention of being with him, stuff like that. But he's all very secretive about the people that he's with, and everything going on. And Mars is in its home sign in a night chart, so I actually feel like Mars is like, yeah, give me a challenge. I'll be under the beams. I don't care. Where Venus is like, I'm getting burned over here. What the hell's going on? So those are some interesting things to think about when we're talking about, like, the intensity, and if a planet could enjoy something versus not enjoy it, and how different planets respond to being, combust or under the beams, and what other things influence those planets. So that's a very interesting thing to look at. And yeah, and return ascender, because their brains are fully formed at 25. So then he's like, I'm out of here. Yeah, I have heard that. Yeah, it's taboo. Venus and Scorpio. Yeah, Pinky, I think you're onto something there. Like, there's taboo. There's a lot of taboo issues and secrets about his relationships. He's never been married. I think that's also interesting too. He doesn't have children. He's never been married. But he has these very intense, maybe he has these very intense love affairs. I mean, it certainly looks intense, looks very, looks pretty hot. Looks pretty hot from where I'm standing, guys. But another thing that I think is interesting about him is that he has played some roles, especially recently with like Great Gatsby and Wolf on Wall Street, where he's like the main character, and the main character is obsessed with wealth and greed and indulgence, and has like an insatiable lust for money, women. The second house is the house of money and things, and it's like, Mars and Venus are there. Like, I've got an insatiable appetite for lust and money and things. And in real life, he doesn't. Like, in real life, Leonardo DiCaprio has been quoted as saying, people are obsessed with money, but I don't believe it makes them happy at all. Maybe some of the partners he's been with have been obsessed with money and power. Maybe he has friends that have been obsessed with money and power, because the sun rules the 11th house, right? Sorry, I thought the door opened there for a second. Maybe the people he dates are obsessed with money, and, with money or power or things like that. But he's talked about in life how he's run into a lot of people who are like super obsessed with money and power. But he said he doesn't think it makes people happy at all. And he was interviewed as he was, working on the movie Wolf on Wall Street. And he said, wow, I'm playing an incredibly powerful man that has a lust for wealth, and that greed and indulgence, and the insatiable ability to consume without regard to anything else but your own lust, is part of human nature. We're supposed to live harmoniously, but greed is everywhere, right? Libra rising. We're supposed to live harmoniously, but greed is everywhere. And he says, I'm not judging it, but he's basically saying which is very Libra, to be like, I'm not judging it, but greed is everywhere, but indulgence is everywhere, but, lust for wealth and power is everywhere. Okay. And, he called the character that he played on Wolf on Wall Street a modern day Caligula. And he said he knows a lot of people who are addicted to money and are not happy with what they have, no matter how much money that they actually have. So, that's a very interesting thing. And he's witnessed a lot of that in his life. And you could see somebody that has Sun, Venus, and Mars with the part of fortune all in the second house, especially Mars is ruling the second house, that you could say, wow, that's a person with a lot of money. That's a person who likes expensive things. That's a person who, for them, issues of money and power and lust and greed are a big deal, or they come up in relationships often, or this is a big theme for this person in this life. Now, he, again, like I said, has talked about how he doesn't believe that money brings happiness and all of that. And how he knows a lot of people that are like that. But he's kind of implying, I know a lot of people like that, but me, myself, I'm not like that. And the one thing that maybe keeps him from being like that, perhaps, is the moon the moon squaring the Saturn. He also has a moon Saturn square in his chart as well, that maybe keeps him a little bit more down to earth, or keeps him a little more grounded in reality, or a little bit more aware of, what actually makes people happy in life, perhaps. But you could also look at his chart and go, wow, that is a perfect chart for somebody who's going to play like The Great Gatsby or Wolf on Wall Street. Like, he can really channel that energy. And I feel, I don't know if you guys saw Wolf on Wall Street. It's one of my favorite movies. I don't know why, but it's just so over the top. And I'm like, oh my God, the acting is really good in it, actually. And it's just like, oh, wow. So, but yeah, a guy that has Mars, Venus, Sun, and Scorpio with the part of fortune in the second house. Yeah, definitely. Wolf on Wall Street could be, could be something there. And an insatiable lust toward women, or, having a lot of women. And he has had a lot of women, I think, actually, in his life, to be fair. Yeah, and Little Lean says it makes sense why he's an environmental activist. Yeah, I agree too. And, I think it's the Uranus in his first house too, that the Uranus Pluto there. I mean, he's got a lot of energy. We didn't even look at his first house and other things he has going on too. But yeah, he is an environmental activist. And, but he said he's been around a lot of people who are like very greedy or indulgent and wasteful, and things like that. But yeah. And Holly says he'll be turning 50 this November. It'll be interesting chapter for him. He could go the George Clooney route. Yeah, maybe. All these people are getting, all these people. I did a lot of people in there. Sometimes it is easier to do the charts of people who are in their 40s and 50s, because they have lived enough life where they've had enough experiences that you can, sometimes it's hard, with like people in their early 20s, because there's still so much of their chart that, truth be told, we're living our chart the moment we come into this lifetime. It's just a lot of the things that we can remember and relate to and put on a timeline, many times happen like later on in life. But yeah, Holly, I think that that'll be interesting too, to see like later in life, does he, I don't know, does he bite the bullet and find somebody and all of that. But yeah, you guys, I hope that that example was helpful to show you an example of, what under the beams and combustion can look like. I know it was a very brief example, but hopefully that was helpful to you guys. And I hope you enjoyed the lecture today. And I wish you all a very wonderful week.